Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. I'm Kevin Bille, and as always, we appreciate you spending some time with us. Hey, just a quick reminder, head on over to wherever you're listening and hit that subscribe button. I know a lot of you are listening but not doing that, so if you could do that, we would greatly appreciate it. Same thing on all the social media platforms. You've been liking a lot of those tweets and some of those posts on Instagram and Facebook. Just continue to retweet and share all of those. That would be helpful. Well, hey, today we are joined by two guests here. This is the first time. The head women's soccer coach, Becky Burleigh. We've been in touch here recently, and then of course Brett Ledbetter. Hey, it's great to have you both here today. I appreciate it.
Got two of us, man.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, this is a bonus. So this is a really good thing. Well, hey, I want to jump in. And I know there's not enough time for me because there's so many questions I want to ask. And I told Becky yesterday, Brett, when we were talking, you're smarter in your big toe than I am my whole body. So this is going to be a challenge for me. I want to know how much of this, first off, how much of this has to do with your experience as a player in terms of your work now?
I would say there's probably a heavy influence on the experiences I had with the coaches I played for. I think that the pivotal moment for me was when I met Dr. Jim Lair, and he exposed me to a new way that you could coach that I had not been exposed to. And it made a lot of sense to me. And I think that conversation, and I was probably 24 when I had that, really changed the trajectory of my life. And Becky, I know you got his quote on top of your desk there.
I do. It's look right up here above me. And, Dr. Jim Lair is one of the original sports psychologists. And the quote I have, I kind of abridged it. It's, who are you becoming as a result of the chase? And I think that's such a good question to ask as we kind of progress through this sports world that we live in.
Hey, Kevin, one of the cool moments for What Drives Winning was our very first conference. Jim was our first speaker.
Oh, wow.
And the first question he asked everyone was, how important is it to know the reason behind what you're doing? And I think that speaks to the intentionality on how he leads and observes people that he works with.
So Brett, you're obviously an author here, speaker, consultant. You guys are doing this What Drives Winning together. I think self-awareness is an important thing. And from the outside looking in, it looks like you really got a good beat or temperature on this. It's crucial, and this can become somewhat complicated. But what are some suggestions or maybe even best practices that you can put in place for this? I mean, it's not just coaches that are listening, but maybe business leaders, owners, any of that. I think it's all relatable. But what would you say to that topic?
Becky actually sent me a text. Was that like 3 nights ago, Becky?
Which one are you talking about? The one about the quote?
It was distancing.
Oh, right.
The term. And I think that the more you can get distance between the person and their actions, so they can almost observe their actions as if it was happening to someone else in a movie, they can see themselves a little bit more clearly. So for us, when we talk self-awareness, it really is the inside journey and trying to build an internal experience that doesn't allow what's happening outside your body to dictate what's happening inside your body. And the more they can understand what's happening inside their body, the more they can externalize it and learn how to deal with it. And when you see it from a different perspective, sometimes it's looking at yourself with fresh eyes. And we were just on a call earlier, and one of the things in basketball, for example, if you watch yourself when you coach on the sidelines and see how often you get snagged by a call, maybe a misexecution, and you're not getting to the next thing, it can be enlightening, because I think it's so hard to have the discipline to coach the next right thing.
So I'd be interested in both you when it comes to this. That's that next play mentality, as we would say, right? Like as a coach or just in your role now, Brett, like if I'm a leader of a team, regardless of whatever that is, once again, sport or business, how do you deal with people that don't have next play mentality?
One of the terms that we use, and we can lean on Becky on application, is next play speed. And so if you audit the action between the action, that really describes the culture and the identity of the team. Because what we found is, and Jay Wright had a great line. He said that the key to building a team is to get your best players the most committed to your core values. And we define ourselves by when things aren't going according to plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so who you are when things aren't going according to plan is the program identity. And so if you can audit that action, so when things don't go well, how many times did you move to the next thing right away? It places a value and a metric for players to see how quick they're moving on. And Becky, you applied that with your team.
Yeah, I think what's cool about that though is it's totally within your control. Like the mistakes aren't. I mean, we have execution mistakes all the time on our team and any team, but everyone's trying to pass the ball to the same colored shirt, but when it gets intercepted, it's not like they're attempting to pass to the other team. So how do we quickly move past that instead of just yell something like, keep it or play to us? Like, no kidding. So that ability to get to the next thing as quickly as possible, and how you can do that as efficiently as you can is the difference between playing present and playing in the past or the future.
And Kevin,
yeah, go ahead, please.
I think that an important thing is, especially from the college level down, the head coach has such an influence on whether or not their team is moving to the next play.
Yeah, can I say one thing about that too? I think I can't remember who it was, Brett. Maybe you can refresh my memory. Maybe it was Bill Beswick that told us about, there are times that you can't ignore the mistake, but is the time right to fix the mistake or move on to the next play? So like when you're in the middle of a game, obviously we don't want to repeat the same mistake over and over again, but right in that moment might not be the time to teach. And so that's the difference of trying to figure that out as a coach.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. I would, and I want to get to some of that here when we talk about the new book. I would be interesting to knowing how important, whether it's this, self-awareness or some of these other things, just in general that we're talking about right now, how important is it? Because you just talked about self. How important is it to ask good questions to identify what some of these things are, and how many people are not doing that for whatever reason?
And are you saying ask questions to the coaches or ask questions to yourself?
That's a good question. I'm saying more of just in general, if I'm trying to educate myself, if I'm trying to become better, if I'm trying to become more self-aware, how important is it to ask those right questions to know what some of those things are, get some of the answers to help me become better at whatever role that might be. Does that make sense?
One of my favorite lines in coaching came from Jack Clark. He said, "Why guess when you can know?" And I think if you build a safe environment for people to be honest, then questions are essential to helping you understand how people are interpreting their experience with you. And it could be as funny as having them make a TikTok video of you and finding a way to modernize their expression and meet them where they're at, because that can be extremely insightful. I mean, I know an NBA coach had a holiday party and they played charades, and he watched a player act him out, and it was incredibly enlightening for him, because the way he viewed himself was not at all how the player acted him out. And maybe the question I would ask the staff and team is, what do you think that we value? Write that down. And then after that, I would say, what is one thing that I need to keep doing to support that? What's one thing that I need to stop doing that would help that? Mm-hmm. Becky, what are your thoughts?
I love the charades or the TikTok video, because obviously when you do that charades or TikTok, you always exaggerate the person's characteristics. But what they choose to exaggerate is what gives you the information. And I think that's always it's, you have to be willing to be a little vulnerable to do that, but it's so enlightening.
That's good. We'll wait to hear how Becky does that at their next party and get back to us on how it went. So I really, I read what drives winning here. I mean, that's the first one I read and received that as a gift from my mom here about a year ago, and it's been really helpful for me.
What does your mom do?
What's that?
What does your mom do?
Well, she's retired now, helps out a little bit at the local church, but it was more of a book that I kind of put on the list, and she just gets what I tell her, so to speak. But
Gotcha.
I found that, we have 3 boys, 13, 11, and 5. And I really love the part about, what you do and who you are. That has been so good. Our oldest plays golf and basketball, and I've used that a lot in golf, probably more so right now. But why do so many people, from what you guys have found out, why do they tie themselves, their identity to what they do rather than who they are?
I would start off by saying that that's what gets recognized. And so typically the guy that scores the most points gets the best looking girls at an early age. And they realize that that is their currency that sets them apart. And so it's really easy to value the outcomes. And I think the higher the level you go, the margin of error gets smaller and smaller. And you realize that there are things, I mean, especially in golf. Yeah. I mean, in basketball, there's one opponent. In golf, what is it? Like, you win, the very, very best win like 8% of their outings.
Yeah, maybe.
And so to me, it's like, the real people that I've been around are always looking at how you respond to the outcomes, good or bad. And the fake people that I've been around reinforce the outcomes, and they ride the wave of those. And I think that's just really hard for a young mind to interpret. Yeah. But the more that you can help create filters to where they can see behavior and categorize it, it helps them deal with some of those forces.
Yeah, what are you seeing at your level, Becky, with that? I mean, is that something that is a consistent thing year in and year out, that identity?
Oh, for sure. And I think, I don't know if you can see it behind me, but there's a quote on my wall here. It says, "Comparison is the thief of joy."
Yeah, amen. And
I think in team settings, there's always the source of comparison is this person starting and I want to be in their shoes, or this person's an All-American and I want that. And then there's the whole part of us as a coach, this person won the league and I want that. So I feel like this era of social media and the amplification of that comparison has only created more of your identity around what you do as opposed to who you are. And so trying to create conditions that get them to understand that it's almost like re-socializing people, which is really hard to do when they've been through, 17 or 18 years of that before they get to you.
Right, right. How as a follow-up to that, Becky, and then of course, if you have some insight to this, Brett, please, but like the comparison and the competing thing, I know that was really good when I read about it. Is comparison, is there any part of it that you could argue is healthy? I mean, is it like, hey, this program, is doing this, and this, and they're the elite and they're the standard. So we need to identify what that is that's getting them there, but also, what is it that's going to make us, or what's going to work within our system or our program? So where does that balance lie with some of that?
Well, I'm actually going to toss this to Brett first, because he had a great TED talk on comparing and competing that I think really illustrated this to a T. And then I'll add on after his discussion on that.
So what I would say, and this is something that Becky and I really connected to her program, is that the TED talk was how to stop comparing and start competing. Mm-hmm. And essentially it is this idea of what is the difference between wanting to be the best and wanting to be my best. And if you think about it, I start the TED talk off asking, if let's say you have a girlfriend and you say to her, "I hope you have a good day today, just not as good as mine," how would that go over with her? And they all laugh because they know that that would not be a good thing to say. Yet we think those things of our teammates. And it's hard for good relationships to exist if that's the way we're processing the forces. And so the goal then becomes to shift the enemy and make the opponent you from yesterday. And then it's me with you as opposed to me versus you. And my competition is with myself from yesterday, and your competition is from yourself. And when you invite that, what happens is you actually want them to be at their best. And I would argue, like, when you have a deep team, you're going to spend more time in practice than you are in the games. And so your development is going to exponentially increase if you're around other talent. And Becky, right before you retired, there was this poem that really resonated that kind of captured exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, it was sort of, well, the overarching theme, I think, was kind of a little bit of a run your own race, but it was really about if a farmer is putting out his best corn seed and that pollination is making the corn seed of the neighboring farm better. And now we're all sharing in that betterment. And if I share my seed with the neighbor to get better corn from them, it creates an even more of a bigger and better corn for all of us.
Love it.
And I think that, sometimes we feel like there's a zero-sum game in athletics. And that's where the comparison, I think, part comes in. Because, like, if we were going to sit here and debate, who is the best, Michael Jordan or LeBron James, like, we could argue that for the rest of the hour.
Right.
But in the end, like, if we're talking about, like, what is this person really, what is their best? That's a hard argument. Like, it's not the same. It's not subjective anymore. It's like, how do I incrementally improve myself?
Yeah, that's really good. And little did I know when I hopped on here with you two that I would get good advice to give the farmer who uses the land behind our house to, man, that's good. He's gonna love it.
Where are you based out of?
So just, south of Canton, Ohio. So yeah, we're in Amish country down here. So lot more land than you have where you guys are at.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I'd be interested with both of you is, you get to talk to a lot of successful coaches. Obviously, Becky, you are one. What are your biggest takeaways from these conversations, these interviews that you're having? I mean, I do think, and like I alluded to earlier in the question asking, I think that's one thing that really sticks out to me when I watch the videos. I think there's some really good questions that get, answers that really, really help. But is there a consistency maybe that everybody has this, or there are a couple things?
I would say that where the conversation goes has really been there's been patterns that have evolved. So a lot around character development, behavior management, priority alignment, and then team dynamics is where we spend a lot of our time. And as of late, I would say the focal point of conversations has been, how do you build an environment where people can do their best work? And as I've observed and thought about the different coaches that I've been around, it's how you define, manage, and model your expectations. And what's been interesting is there's so many different successful coaches that do it so different, and they're stronger in some areas than others. But from a standpoint of getting those three things to align, I think that's when you start to see the transcendent leaders.
Anything, I mean, obviously there's some things in there probably that you can relate to personally, Becky, but anything else in addition to that sticks out for you?
Well, I think since I've been involved with What Drives Winning, to me, it's been like this free education of being able to have access to people's minds and thought patterns and how they do things. And just taking the things that I can really resonate with and applying them to my program. It's like, you can't pay money for that, and I think that's one of the things that at What Drives Winning we're trying to do is allow people that wouldn't have that same access to have it. And I think Brett's question asking gets them there quicker than they might even be able to get there themselves. And I would say one of the one of the things that has always resonated with me for the longest time was an interview with Billy Donovan, who I know you're familiar with. Um, and it was Billy talking about one of his players, and he was saying, here's a guy frustrated, down, disappointed. And he said the question he kept asking himself was, is that who you want to be? And I really feel like I must have like a little bobblehead doll of Billy Donovan sitting on my shoulder sometimes, like when I am frustrated or when I'm in a bad situation and I'm trying to make a choice that lets myself off the hook. I just hear that voice of Billy saying, is that who you want to be? And I would say most of the time I'm like, no, that's not who I want to be. And I make the right choice. But I think we all need those reminders. And I think that's what these conversations do for me, is just kind of give me a reminder and a structure of, if I'm really striving to be my best self, sometimes I need a little support in doing that.
Yeah, that's good. And I think the character part is crucial, at least to me. And when I think of, just all the times that I've been down there, when I was driving those guys around recruiting, as we were talking about Becky, Billy, Shy, Donnie, like their character is just unbelievable. They have a unique way of just being present, when you're with them and just making you feel important. But I do think that's genuine. And I think that really helps in terms of their leadership style, and that translates over to coaching, obviously. I'd just be interested before we jump into the new book, if you could give any feedback to people listening that, I think there's a lot of things that we're dealing with right now, coaches in general, with some sensitive topics in this past year, social justice, for example, but even how to translate that, if that's not something you're dealing with in the team, just or in this business, once again, like what is it that you would tell them when there are disagreements or there's people on your team that aren't on the same page? Then what? Like, how do they do a better job of dealing with that? Because I got to think that everybody at some point is dealing with it.
You're lucky because you have one of the very best in the business at this. And so that being said, Becky, floor is yours.
I love how he throws me the hard questions. I think one of the things that was my biggest challenge with COVID was we are a team that I would like to think communicates on hard issues. And COVID threw us some curveballs in the ability to communicate on those hard issues in a setting that felt authentic. So Zoom maybe isn't that setting.
Right.
When you're in an auditorium where you're 10 feet apart from each other and you have 30 people and you're yelling across the room, that's not really authentic. And I think that challenge made it difficult to deal with the issues that were present in the fall. But at the same time, I think that if we had not attempted to deal with those issues, it also would have felt inauthentic, because why would we not deal with hard issues just because they're hard and in a hard environment? And so I think despite the fact that I'm not sure we were 100% successful in addressing those issues all the time, I think I'm proud of the fact that we attempted to address those issues despite the circumstances.
Yeah, that's good insight. That's really good insight. Well, hey, let's talk about this new book, What Drives Winning Environments. This deals, with behavior management. You alluded to that a little bit earlier when you were giving another answer. I'd like to just dive into it a little bit. And Brett, you mentioned something, like just give us some initial feedback on this, because you mentioned something earlier, like college down, where they have more of that influence, where like an MBA coach, doesn't have, that influence or very little to begin with. So just give us some insight to that first part of some of that behavior management, if you would, please.
So power dynamic. So if we think about it from you're defining is going to be proactive approach. So you're communicating what your expectations are, whether you're dictating it or collaborating, you're establishing norms. And then you have the managing aspect. That's, to me, what I love watching, is because in college, coaches have so much power. So Kevin, you're a basketball guy, right?
Yep.
And you think about, if you were to look at the teams ranked 10 through 14, you would probably be able to name the head coach in college, because those are the ones that are marketed. There's a lot of pageantry at that level. But if you go to the NBA and look at teams 10 through 14, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't, right?
Right.
And so to me, the NBA requires a more sophisticated management style. And when you're able to tap into the intrinsic motivation and get people to change their behavior because they want to change their behavior, that is really what separates coaches in my mind. And we talk about the difference between winning influence and forcing control. And anytime you're exercising your authority to force control, that is a power mechanism. That's a power tool. Anytime you're listening, you're nudging, those are what we would call pro tools. And so it's just interesting to watch all the below the line behavior and have coaches audit what percent of the time are you using power tools versus pro tools.
Yeah, I feel like when I read that first book, and then just in general, I'm watching all those things, you guys could have called me for an example of what not to do, and it's exposed.
Why do you say that?
Well, no, it's been really, I think it's just, it's made me think differently. I'm not coaching obviously right now, but I'm okay. I love being exposed in some of those areas that that maybe you didn't. I think you bring in just a unique perspective to it and a different angle. So I think that's really good. I think the challenge is there's just so much out there and so many, doing this, this is like 49 or 50 episodes. And I think Becky and I were talking about this. There's just so many different ways to do it. I think that maybe I knew that existed, but then when you hear it and you talk to people like it, I think it's really neat. But I think the challenge then becomes what fits for me, because maybe I can't coach the way that Becky does because we're not the same, and I can't try to be her necessarily.
Yeah, Kevin, can I add to
So
that
I
a little
think
bit?
that's
It's
where the
interesting.
challenge becomes. So that's
Interesting
that's where
career
I would
path
go
for
with
me
that. But
was
the
that
exposure's
I was a
fine.
head
I'm good
coach
with
at
it.
age 21, a college head coach. And
Please.
obviously that's a really unique situation. I had 4 players on that team that were older than I was. And I think without even knowing it, I realized that I was not in a power situation in that role. So I had to learn to coach through influence, which probably set the tone for my coaching, because all of my coaches that I had previously, like my college coach, even my high school coach, were definitely more power-based coaches. But I don't think that really would have worked for me in that particular situation. Then I come to Florida and I'm 26. So I have a little bit more power, but still I'm 26 at Florida. So I think that sometimes you talk about like what works for someone doesn't work for someone else. I mean, so here I am, a college coach that has power, but my circumstance doesn't dictate that I do. And so I have to be authentic with the situation I have as well as my own strengths and weaknesses.
Right. Well, yeah, and it takes me back to when I was 25 and I hired a head coach and thought I knew everything and knew nothing. And it's like that title lasted all but 2 seconds, right? And
Kevin, I want to say something that. So I think about this. There was someone that asked a very wealthy investor, what would you like to know about investments that we'll never know? And he said the role luck played in it. And I think that so many times we're successful and there's so many factors that we never even consider, but we let the outcome reinforce the way we think we led. And so then we just double down on our approach, and it may or may not be the reason that our team is achieving.
Yeah, for sure. Let that first part, that defining the the standards.
Oh, you're talking to Florida, man.
Yeah, what am I doing? That's terrible. No pun intended there, right? But hey, how does a coach or team go about that? Like, how do they define this? Is there something that you would say, take these steps, or this is the best practice that you've seen? What would you tell people that are listening to that?
I would riff off what you just said, and it's different for everyone. I do think that the more you can increase shared ownership, the more successful that it will become. So the more you can incorporate the voices of everybody into a shared value set. So I'm going to throw it over to Becky. You're talking
Well,
to
I think
one of
it
the
goes
most
back to what we were just
collaborative
talking about. Like,
coaches
that
that
was
I've ever been
my
around.
upbringing in
And
coaching,
I
to
think
be
she
collaborative.
uses that collaborative technique with her
I
team.
do feel like, though, that that shared idea of what we're all trying to do together, it feels to me like we're all on the same side trying to achieve these standards, as opposed to me dictating the standards and I'm trying to pull you up to these standards. Just the energy that surrounds both of those feels so different to me.
Let's go into the managed part then. Kind of define or break down to our audience about the catching above the line behavior, converting below the line, what exactly that means and how to go about that, please.
So anytime you define an expectation, that draws a line between what's acceptable behavior and unacceptable behavior. And acceptable behavior, using Urban Meyer's term, is considered above the line behavior. And then anything that doesn't meet the standards of the program is considered below the line. And so from a tool standpoint, as a coach, when you catch above the line, you're educating your team on the behaviors, the winning behaviors that you want repeated. And then anything that's below the line, how you convert that behavior also communicates your values. So many times we see coaches, when their players are below the line, the coach responds in a below the line way. Mm-hmm. And it's impulsive. And so how do you approach those moments that catch you off guard in a way that aligns with who you are? So think about this, Kevin. So you're a basketball coach. A player comes off, you sub him out, and he says, F you, on the way to the bench. What are you doing with that scenario, Kevin?
Well, my 43 or my 25?
How about both? I would be very curious to hear how you would answer that from both perspectives.
Well, and I think it does depend on probably.
Let's start with 25, man.
Well, man, I'm an intense guy. I would have not handled it well. I can tell you that, because it was
Would you have dismissed them from the sideline?
Boy, that's tough to say. I might have. I mean, that's a 50-50 for me right now. I know my focus would have been off the game and where it needed to be and derailed to that, and how I would have acted emotionally. I'm an emotional guy in general, but then being as intense as I would and taking over, when I got there, they were 9-49 and 0-30 in the league. So I was really kind of setting the tone. We won the first league game, Brett. I should have retired after that. They would have built a statue, I said. But I think it would have been, I don't think it would have been pretty. I think now, I don't think I would have gotten caught up in it then, because I wouldn't have let that take away from where the focus needed to be.
So I am very curious, though. So let's say that happens, you're 43. Put yourself in that scenario. What are you doing?
Man, I'm being exposed on the air here. I better make sure. See these deep questions again. No, I just think that I think probably, man, oh man, that's a great question. If it happened right, man, how much is it? First half, second half? No. I think that I would have just kind of let it go and just paid a little bit of attention to his behavior then, to see what he was doing. Maybe had an assistant look into it a little bit. If it is before the half, do I get a chance to address it at halftime? Is it 5 minutes to go? Is it a tight game? Are we up 20, down 20? I think some of those things might have played a factor into that, but I don't know if that's a right or wrong there either.
It makes me think of just even the 2018 national championship game in football. If you go back and look at the film, Alabama, there was an unsportsmanlike penalty, and then the coach treats the fire with the player, and the player has to be restrained by his teammates for swinging on the coach. And that's a national championship game. And I think that coaches are put in these precarious situations that have to be managed. And football is interesting too, because it's a 6-time multiple roster than a basketball. So the behavioral probability of issues is going to go 6 times higher. So how you manage that
20s,
communicates
30.
to everybody large scale. And it's similar with soccer. Becky, typical roster size for you is what? And so their probability is going to be a little bit higher than basketball.
Yeah,
and so
right.
how you manage these scenarios communicates to everybody what you value. That's one thing I'll say too, man. I always like when coaches ask their team, what do we value? Just write 3 to 5 things, because their interpretation is based on your behavior. So it's probably closer to reality than what you actually say you value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Well, hey, let's
He's on a mission, Becky. He's got his task list. He's checking those boxes, man.
let's
Red
wrap
pin
up.
out.
Let's wrap up here with one thing I am curious to know before we get into these 3 pointers, if you will, is how do each of you grow? You know, how are you
For me,
learning? How are you
I
getting? You know,
consume
is it
information in a
podcasts? Is it
variety of
books?
ways.
Like,
I love
how
podcasts,
are you
especially
doing
when
that?
I'm exercising. I love reading. I'm a big reader. I can read quite fast and retain, so I really enjoy reading. But I also think like one conversation at a time. I mean, I had a conversation with one of our players earlier today where I'm like, wow, I learned a lot in that one. And so I think it's just like having the curious mind, like there's opportunities to learn pretty much in any situation you're in.
Yeah. What are some of your? Let me before, if you don't mind me injecting real quick, Brett. What would be some of your favorite books and why, or any that you would? We love doing
Yeah,
this part
I
of
actually
the
right
segment.
now I'm reading Chatter. I
Is
just
that
started
question
that
to
one.
Yeah,
I'm
Becky?
probably
sorry,
about halfway
Becky.
through
Yeah,
it.
what would be some of you
That's
talk
been
about the
very
reading
interesting to
before
me.
we go to Brett?
I've read, I think, every Jim Lair book that's out there. The Power of Full Engagement is one of my favorites. The Only Way to Win is another one. Um, Obviously, I love all the What Drives Winning books. I've read that multiple times.
Nice.
There you go, Becky.
Good. I like it. How about you, Brett?
Yeah, for me, I would say that generally speaking, when I'm going into a room, that person is extremely intellectual, and I would say they're smarter than me. And so just having substantive conversations on a daily basis with people that I love and respect would be how I grow.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think I'm going to something next week down in Florida with a private thing with 2 former Good Stuff guests here, and I know I'm going to be the dumbest guy in the room, but hopefully when I come back I'm not. So, any books though, Brett, that you really enjoy?
I love this guy named Anthony DeMello.
Okay,
And The Way to Love is a book that deeply resonates with me.
gotcha. Good. Okay. Well, hey, we're going to wrap up here.
I got range, Kevin. I got
We're going to
range.
3 pointers,
Gatorhead.
as I
I
told
shoot
you.
from the
Becky, I
Gatorhead.
don't know how your jumper is. I know Brett's is good, but we'll see how each of you do. So how about I just,
Yes, I have played
I'll
a little
go,
noon ball. I'm a
all
liability,
right. I
but they
like
take
it.
me.
I
Hey,
like it.
Becky did the staff pickup games, noon
Oh
ball.
no.
She was the screener, Kevin.
There you go. Well, Becky, we're gonna go for you first here. And these aren't too bad. Don't worry. But first thing here, if people could learn, you know, one
I
thing
think
maybe
for
from this
me,
talk or just in
when
general
I
with what
got
drives
involved with
winning,
What
what would you want
Drives
them to
Winning, and we
take from this,
started,
or in
you know,
general, and
creating
just
this
kind of hold on
community,
to?
I felt like I had finally found my people. And I think it's people who are curious, people who are wanting to sort of revolutionize the coaching profession and do it in a way that sort of like what Brett's talking about with the behavior management, involves more influence than power. But there's just, oh my gosh, the coaching lab is my favorite thing. It's a bi-monthly thing. We just started 2 weeks ago. We had our first
I
one.
mean,
We have
Becky,
another one
talk
this
about the
Sunday.
coaching lab on that.
And it's a subscription model that you can join at your will. And it's just like, it's a great environment to talk about current events, as well as specific things like, for example, the define management model that we talked about today. But we try to hit all those pillars that Brett sort of mentioned, you know, the team dynamics, the priority alignment, behavior management. But the conversations are what make it amazing, because we've got coaches from all levels sort of sharing their experiences.
Right. That's great. Now, I want to make sure at the end we do let them know more where they can find that coaching lab. Anything in regards to that one thing from this talk, Brett, that you kind of want them to hold on to that we touch base on?
I would say that when you're building an environment where people can do their best work, how you define, manage, and model your expectations can create that. And then ultimately trying to repurpose the sport experience to help them become stronger human beings.
That's good. Man, I don't know if I should ask this because I feel like I've already been held accountable enough, but second question, if you could step in my shoes.
Ooh, so I get to ask Brett a question?
And come over here and ask Brett or Becky a question. What question would you ask that I didn't get to today?
Oh, if you could ask Becky a question.
Well, no, it'd be more if you were over here. Yeah, and you could have asked. So Becky, if you could ask Becky a question, what question would have been that I didn't ask? Or Brett, if you could ask, what question would have you asked?
Brett and What Drives Winning has had in my coaching. And I would answer that by saying the ability to take something I knew I wanted to have as part of my program, the character development, and systematize that in a way that was more productive in my program. And have a great thinking partner along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. How about you, Brett?
I would say, when are we going to a Dave Matthews concert?
There we go. All right. I like it. Just as a final, a third question, a wrap up, and we can start with you again, Becky, if that's all right. But Good Stuff's the name of this.
I'm not digging the colors though. It's
who
like
drew
Georgia
the logo?
That is our 5-year-old son, Easton. I mean, it's
That's
pretty
amazing.
good, man.
I was guessing the 5-year-old.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, I can't. Well, hey, we can get some Florida gear up. I think all my Florida shirts are gone, though. Ironically, we're looking through baby pictures last night because our 13-year-old had to take one in, and he took the one with his Florida Gator onesie. So I got that from working camp. But Good Stuff's the name of this. Before we dive into some of those particulars,
so
once
I
again,
think one
just
thing
give us
that's
some
really
good
good
stuff
stuff that I loved
you feel
over
would be
COVID
appropriate
was
right now.
watching
Let's
Ted
go with you
Lasso.
first, Coach.
That's my contribution to good stuff. If you haven't watched it, watch it.
That's good.
Hey, so are we recommending resources or just thoughts?
Just whatever you feel is appropriate right now.
I would say that this comes from Sherry Cole. It's a quote that deeply resonated with me. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives.
Yeah, that is good stuff. Well, there you go. Both of you, 3 for 3. How about that? 6 3-pointers. Hey, let's talk a little bit just where can our listeners, let's start first with the social media portion. Where can they find you on social media?
So the Twitter account, we typically just use Twitter, and it's WDW Combo. And if you go to our website, it's whatdriveswinning.com. And there's a lot of free assets there. And then if you're interested in the coaching lab, you can go to learn.whatdriveswinning.com.
Multiple.
And then anything in regards to the books, you can find all that on the website as well.
Yeah, you need to get one, man.
Yeah, I know. I'm behind here. I'll start going on future podcasts and mentioning your book, and then you
let's go, man.
Podcast. And then I'm a little disappointed Becky didn't mention our podcast she listens to, but maybe in the future here. So. Well, hey, this was great. Like I said earlier, I think you guys just bring such a unique and profound perspective to this. I love the way you look at things and just dive a little bit deeper for your audience. If people haven't gone on to these videos and the website and the books.
What's your favorite video you've seen?
Oh, man. I mean this with all sincerity. They're all good. I take something away. I like Brett and Bille. I mean, I'm biased to those guys, their temperament. So yeah, and I don't know if I'm more biased too because of the basketball part, and Sherry Cole, she's good.
I know.
She was even down there at that clinic at one point, Becky, and spoke. Mm-hmm. She's really good. Yeah. So, but yeah, they're good. They're good. But yeah, like I said earlier, I think. I do really respect the fact that this makes me think differently and exposes me. I'm very appreciative of that. So, hey, I just want to thank you both for taking the time to join us today and
we
just giving
respect
some
what
insight.
you're doing, man.
What's
we really
that?
do. We respect what you're doing. Becky
Yeah.
sent me some links, and I think it's a really cool journey you're on, and you bring a high level of authenticity to it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Well, hey, we'll stay in touch, and thanks again. And for all the listeners, hopefully you can go to some of these videos and be exposed just like me, or like I was earlier today with how I'd handle the situation. But these guys truly do have a lot of good stuff. And as always, reach out to goodstuffkevin@gmail.com and let us know your thoughts. Till next time, good stuff.